On this quiet suburban street where neighbors greet each other with half-hearted smiles and gossip lingers behind closed doors, one woman's life would change forever. The golden glow of late afternoon casts long shadows along the sidewalks, the peacefulness belying an undercurrent of something darker, something ominous. In the distance, the faint sound of footsteps echoes. Slow, deliberate, steady. Eleanor Davis walks through this stillness, her pace measured, her presence commanding. She is a black woman in her mid-60s, her features marked by years of resilience, years of living through hardships and triumphs. Her eyes, sharp yet gentle, seem to observe everything around her, and every step she takes is a silent declaration of strength. The late afternoon sun catches the silver of the locket around her neck, a gift from her late husband, now long past but never forgotten. The locket has become more than a keepsake. It's a symbol of her survival, her journey, and her refusal to bend to the pressures of time or the world around her. By her side, trotting with perfect loyalty, is Duke, the Rottweiler, a steadfast companion, his coat gleaming in the fading sunlight. He walks close to her, never more than a step behind, eyes alert, ears flicking at every sound, his muscular body tense with a quiet power. He knows his role, as does she. Their bond, forged over years of companionship, is unspoken but understood. Duke is not just a pet. He is a protector, a defender, and Eleanor's unwavering shield. Yet the calmness of this moment, this quiet walk in the neighborhood, is deceptive. Beneath the surface, things are not as simple as they seem. Eleanor, though respected in her community, is often judged. She can feel the whispers that trail behind her, the stares that linger a little too long, the sideways glances that suggest something less than welcome. The town may greet her with polite smiles, but they are always followed by quiet judgments, hidden beneath layers of civility. Her pride and dignity have earned her the respect of some, but they have also brewed resentment in others. And it is at this very moment, as Eleanor walks with Duke, that the undercurrent of tension begins to surface. 4 young men, their laughter cutting through the stillness, appear at the far end of the street. Their approach is slow but deliberate, a sense of entitlement surrounding them like a cloud. They are unaware of the strength standing just a few yards ahead of them, unaware of the woman and her dog who are about to alter their fate. Their mockery, their sneering smiles are all too familiar. Yet today the threat they represent is something far more dangerous. The leader, tall and brash, wears a look of superiority that's only made worse by his words dripping with disdain, mocking Eleanor for her age, for her race, for her calm demeanor in the face of their presence. They have no idea who they're dealing with. The air seems to shift. Eleanor doesn't flinch, but Duke's posture stiffens. His growl low but growing louder. Something inside him stirs. A warning, a premonition. The gang doesn't know it yet, but they've chosen the wrong woman. They've chosen the wrong dog. This is where their story begins. This is where they'll learn that some things cannot be underestimated, that loyalty, respect, and strength can often be found in the most unexpected places. As Eleanor continues down the familiar street, her steps a rhythm she's walked countless times, something begins to shift in the air. The soft hum of the evening breeze, the distant sound of children playing, all fade into the background as the subtle shift of a truck engine catches her attention. She glances over her shoulder just for a moment and notices the black pickup truck creeping slowly behind her, its engine rumbling, unsettling in the otherwise peaceful afternoon. It isn't the truck itself that raises the first red flag. It's the way it lingers, suspiciously, unnervingly close. The men in the truck are not just driving past, no, they're slowing down, matching her pace as if they're waiting for something, sizing her up. Their laughter reaches her ears before they even come into full view, a sound that cuts through the quiet suburban street like a blade. It's harsh, mocking, the kind of laughter that echoes with a cruel intent, a sound that promises nothing good. The truck's windows roll down, and Eleanor knows. She doesn't need to see them to feel the danger rising. These aren't just men passing by. These are predators, and they've chosen her as their prey. The leader of the group, a tall man with a smirk that doesn't quite reach his eyes, leans out of the window. His voice is loud, laced with mockery, and something darker that Eleanor recognizes all too well. "What are your wills if someone called 911? Training's been complete. You're fired from the Army." His words hit her ears like stones, heavy with disdain. "Nice dog, ma'am," he calls out, his voice dripping with condescension. His eyes flick over Duke, taking in the Rottweiler's powerful frame, but it's clear that he doesn't see the dog as a protector. Not yet. To him, Duke is just another obstacle to be dismissed. His tone shifts, now addressing Eleanor directly. "You a little too old to be walking around these parts alone, don't you think?" The other men in the truck laugh, their voices overlapping, each one trying to outdo the other with louder, more menacing comments. One of them, his voice tinged with a dangerous edge, adds, "What's with all the shiny stuff? Jewelry like that, it's not safe around here, lady." His gaze is fixed on the silver locket at Eleanor's neck, the gleam of it catching the fading sunlight, an irresistible target in their eyes. Eleanor feels the sting of their words, but her face remains calm, unwavering. She doesn't respond immediately. Her eyes flicker over the truck, taking in every detail. There are 4 of them, young and brash, clearly drunk on their own sense of entitlement. They think they can take what they want. They think they can intimidate her. But she's not like the others they've harassed before. She's not someone who will cower or back down. And Duke is already tense beside her, his body coiled like a spring, ready to protect. As the truck slows further, Eleanor keeps walking, her pace steady, every movement deliberate. She knows that showing any fear will only feed their amusement, their arrogance. They think she's weak, a target they can push around. But there is something in the way she holds herself, something in her eyes, that gives them pause, just for a moment. The silence between the men grows heavy, a brief flicker of hesitation. Eleanor's grip on Duke's leash tightens, just slightly. Duke notices the change in her stance, the subtle shift in her energy, and his muscles tense in response. His growl deepens, a low rumble that reverberates in the air, a warning. "What's wrong, boy?" one of the men taunts, his voice mocking as he leans farther out the window. "You getting nervous? Is she making you nervous?" Eleanor doesn't respond to the man's jabs. Instead, she speaks directly to Duke, her voice soft but firm, reassuring him with the same calm confidence she's carried her whole life. "It's okay, boy. We've got this." Her words are steady, a quiet defiance against the encroaching threat. But inside, her heart is racing, the adrenaline beginning to pump through her veins. She can feel the tension building, the air around them growing thick with the promise of violence. Another man in the truck, bolder now, leans out and calls to her. "You can't be walking these streets acting like you own 'em. You looking to get robbed, lady?" His tone shifts, darker, now laced with an unmistakable threat. The playful jabs have turned to something more sinister, something more dangerous. Eleanor pauses for just a fraction of a second, her gaze never leaving the men, assessing the situation with the quiet wisdom that comes from years of experience. They're not just mocking her, they're sizing her up. They've made up their minds. They want her necklace. They want her jewelry. And they believe that she, an elderly black woman, will be too easy to intimidate, too weak to fight back. They don't know her, not at all. They don't know what she's capable of. Eleanor continues walking, her movements deliberate. Duke matches her stride, his body taut with tension. The truck comes to a complete stop beside them, blocking her path, the engine purring like a predator waiting for its prey to move closer. "You really going to keep walking, old lady?" the leader of the group calls out, his voice harsh, venomous. His words slice through the air, an insult. A challenge. "You don't want to make this hard on yourself. Just hand over the necklace and we'll be on our way." Eleanor doesn't break her pace, doesn't falter. She's heard threats like this before, empty, foolish threats. She knows what they want, what they think they can take, but she also knows that they've made a fatal mistake. Her grip on Duke's leash tightens again, her knuckles white. She knows that Duke is more than just a companion. He's a guardian, and Duke knows that it's time to protect his person. What a big mistake, Eleanor says, her voice low but firm, unwavering in its strength. I won't give you a damn thing. The men scoff at her, laughing like they've already won. They think she's an easy target, an old woman with a dog. What they don't understand is that Eleanor isn't just any woman, and Duke isn't just any dog. She's not afraid of them. Duke's growl grows louder, deeper, vibrating in the air like the warning it is. The tension in the street becomes palpable, thickening with every second that passes. Eleanor doesn't flinch. She stands tall, facing the men without a hint of fear in her posture, in her eyes, and then, as if to punctuate her resolve, Duke lets out a single sharp bark, a command, a warning, a promise. The men look at each other, the uncertainty creeping into their eyes. For the first time, the bravado begins to waver, but they aren't ready to back down yet. They don't see the danger, not yet. The truck doors slam open with an echoing thud, a sound that amplifies the sudden shift in the air. The men spill out one by one, their steps heavy on the pavement, their presence surrounding her like a suffocating fog. The tension, once a vague sense in the distance, is now an inescapable weight pressing down on Eleanor's chest. She doesn't flinch as they fan out around her, trying to intimidate her with their sheer numbers, their loud, brash movements. It's a well-worn tactic, a show of strength meant to make her feel small, to make her believe that they hold the power. The leader, still smirking, steps forward first, and the others follow suit, all eyes fixed on Eleanor's jewelry. They eye the locket, the glint of silver against her chest, their gazes sharp and calculating like vultures circling over prey. "You think that little trinket's gonna keep you safe?" the leader sneers, his voice low and venomous. "Ain't nobody in this town cares about your old shiny things. You think you're special, think we don't know exactly what we want?" His words drip with disdain, each syllable steeped in mockery, as if every ounce of his being is convinced that Eleanor's strength and dignity are nothing but facades that can easily be stripped away. "What's a woman like you doing out here all alone anyway?" One of the other men pipes up, his voice laced with racial venom. He takes a step closer to Eleanor, his face twisted in disgust. "Should be at home, cooking dinner, not out here acting like you belong." The air between them crackles with animosity. Their words sting, but Eleanor doesn't let them see it. She's heard these kinds of insults her entire life. The looks, the whispers, the microaggressions from people who don't understand what it means to stand tall in a world that's determined to tear you down. She's survived it all before, and she's not about to let these young men break her now. Her mind races not with fear, but with a quiet awareness of the threats she's faced in the past, the countless encounters where she was underestimated because of her race, her gender, her age. She remembers the way people have treated her, how they've tried to take what she's earned, belittled her, and tried to make her feel less than she is. But each time, she rose stronger, fiercer than before. "You really think you can intimidate me?" Eleanor thinks to herself, her grip tightening around Duke's leash. The bond between them is unspoken but undeniable, a connection forged through years of companionship and loyalty. The men encircle her now, their mocking laughter ringing in the air, trying to wear her down, make her feel small. But Eleanor stands tall, her spine straight, her eyes scanning each man with cold calculation. She doesn't need to look at Duke to know that he's already aware of the danger. She can feel it in the tension of the leash, in the way he moves, slightly in front of her, positioning himself as her protector. Duke's growl rumbles deep from his chest, low and menacing, a sound that carries with it a promise. The men pause, their eyes flickering toward the Rottweiler for the first time, their expressions betraying a momentary flicker of uncertainty, but they quickly recover, their bravado resurfacing. "Your dog ain't gonna save you, lady," one of the men scoffs, trying to laugh off Duke's warning, but the doubt in his voice is there, a crack in their facade of confidence. Eleanor doesn't respond. She doesn't need to. Her silence speaks volumes. She's been in these situations before. She knows the power of staying calm, of letting the enemy believe they have control. all while knowing exactly when to strike back. Duke's growl intensifies, a low, constant rumble, his body taut with readiness. His eyes never leave the men, scanning them, calculating their every move. Eleanor can feel the shift in him. He's not just her companion anymore. He's her partner, her guardian. She's never doubted his loyalty, not once in all the years they've shared together, and in this moment she knows with every fiber of her being that he will protect her with his life. The leader of the gang tries again, stepping closer to Eleanor with the same menacing smirk on his face. "You really think a dog's gonna stop us? We don't need no dog to take what we want." His voice drips with malice, his eyes darting from the locket around Eleanor's neck to her face, searching for any sign of weakness. But Eleanor doesn't give him that satisfaction. She stands firm, her gaze unwavering, her mind sharp. The words they speak don't touch her, not anymore. In the back of her mind, Eleanor recalls the countless times she's had to prove herself, the challenges she's faced, the battles she's fought, not just against others, but against society's expectations. She's heard it all, her whole life. That's what they don't understand, these men circling her now. They think they can intimidate her because they see a black woman, an elderly woman walking alone. But they don't know her. They don't know the years of strength and resilience that have built her into the woman standing before them now. Duke's growl rises in volume, his body rippling with the tension of impending action. His instincts are telling him that the time to act is drawing near, and Eleanor's calm, steady hand on the leash reassures him. She doesn't need to say a word to him. He knows what comes next. And if it's up to him, these men will regret ever laying eyes on Eleanor Davis. The leader's smirk falters as he takes a step back, eyeing Duke one more time. The doubt is clear now, more pronounced than it was a few seconds ago. But they're too far gone. They're already invested in the idea that they can take what they want. Their pride won't allow them to back down, not yet. "Come on, guys," one of the men says, his voice losing its bravado. "Let's just take the jewelry and go. We don't want no trouble." His words are laced with uncertainty now, a crack in the facade they've so carefully built. But the leader is still holding on to that fragile sense of control, still trying to assert dominance over the situation. "Shut up," the leader snaps, but there's a hint of hesitation in his voice. He's no longer certain. The dog's growl, Eleanor's stillness, the way she stands, her unwavering confidence, it's starting to chip away at the false sense of power they've been riding on. Duke's growl shifts into a bark, sharp and commanding, a sound that sends a ripple through the group of men. They flinch, their earlier bravado faltering as they begin to realize the truth. Eleanor Davis isn't the easy target they thought she was, and Duke is ready to make sure they know it. The men close in tighter, each step they take echoing like a ticking clock, their feet growing heavier with every movement, their presence pressing down on Eleanor. The silence of the street, so peaceful just moments ago, is now swallowed by the sound of their taunting laughter, their mocking voices reverberating through the cool afternoon air. Their words are venom, but Eleanor stands her ground, unwavering, as if rooted to the earth itself. Duke's growl grows louder, a constant warning that reverberates from deep within his chest, a sound so menacing it sends shivers down the spine. But Eleanor's calm presence contrasts sharply with the gang's escalating aggression. Her hands, though tense, remain steady on the leash. She doesn't flinch, doesn't show fear, even as the men draw closer. "You really think we're going to stop because you've got a dog?" The leader steps forward, his face twisted in contempt. He waves a dismissive hand at Duke, the slightest trace of nervousness flashing in his eyes quickly masked by bravado. "This mutt ain't gonna do anything. Ain't no one gonna care about some dog in a town like this. You think we're afraid of a little bark?" Their words drip with racism, deep-seated hatred that's been bubbling beneath the surface for years. Eleanor can feel it, the weight of their prejudices, their belief that no one would care about a black woman, especially one alone in a quiet town like this. She's seen it before, the way people think they can do whatever they want, take whatever they want, because they believe no one will stand up for someone like her. The leader sneers, his eyes flicking back to the locket that rests against Eleanor's chest. You really think that old thing makes you important?" His voice is harsh, cutting through the air like a knife. "No one cares about you, not your dog, not your jewelry, not your life. You're just another nigger in the wrong place at the wrong time, and nobody's gonna bat an eye when you're gone." The words hit hard. They sting, but Eleanor doesn't let 'em show. She knows what they're trying to do. They're trying to break her, to make her feel small, insignificant. But she's not afraid. Not anymore. She's lived too long to let men like this take anything from her, not her dignity, not her peace, and certainly not her life. "If you want to take my life, you'll have to get past him," Eleanor says quietly, her voice steady but laced with warning. It's a statement, not a plea. She speaks as if she's already made her peace with the outcome, whatever it may be. Duke's stance has shifted, his body coiled like a spring ready to react at the slightest provocation. His eyes are locked on the gang, his muscles tensed, every fiber of his being focused on his mission: protect Eleanor at all costs. The growl that rumbles in his chest now is no longer a warning, it's a promise. The leader hesitates, just for a moment. But that moment is enough to reveal the crack in his confidence. For all his bravado, there's a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes, a brief pause that speaks volumes. His group, too, begins to sense it. They don't know what Duke is capable of. They underestimate him. But they're starting to realize that he's not just some dog. They've underestimated Eleanor's strength, too. "Come on, man," one of the other men grumbles, stepping back. "This is a waste of time. Let's just take what we want and go." But the leader doesn't listen. His sense of entitlement, his arrogance, pushes him forward. He thinks that just because they've cornered her, because they've surrounded her, he can control the situation. He doesn't understand what he's up against. He steps closer to Eleanor, too close now. Duke's growl deepens, vibrating through the air, filling the space between them. Eleanor's grip on the leash tightens, but she doesn't look down at Duke. She doesn't need to. She knows he's ready. She knows the moment she gives the signal, Duke will move. "You think you're better than us, don't you?" The leader's voice is tinged with frustration now. He's not getting the reaction he wants. He wants fear. He wants her to cower. But Eleanor isn't cowering, not even close. "You and your little dog think you're something special? You think we'll just walk away because you've got a guard dog?" His words slice through the air, but Eleanor remains unshaken. Her body is still, her face impassive, as if she's already seen this scene unfold 100 times before, as if she's already won. But inside, a fire is growing, not from fear, but from something deeper, something that says, "No one takes what's mine, not my peace, not my dignity, not my safety." The men laugh again, this time louder, more uncomfortable, and they circle her tighter, their eyes flickering between Eleanor and Duke, unsure of who to focus on. They've lost their rhythm now. They're desperate to assert control, but they're no longer certain they can. The leader's hand twitches, hovering near his pocket where a knife glints in the afternoon light, ready to make the threat physical if the verbal ones don't work. Eleanor knows this is the moment. This is where everything shifts. Her mind is razor-sharp, her body poised for action. She feels the weight of Duke's presence beside her, the deep connection between them, the silent understanding that they are in this together. The leader takes a step forward, knife in hand, his face twisted in anger. His eyes are fixed on Eleanor's jewelry, on the locket that represents everything they think they can take from her. He's so close now that Eleanor can feel his breath on her skin, hot and foul. She can feel the knife just inches from her body. But it's in this moment that the balance of power shifts completely. Duke's growl becomes a full-throated bark, an explosive sound that shatters the tension like glass. In an instant, Duke springs into action, his massive body moving with a speed and power that surprises everyone. He leaps forward, jaws snapping, his teeth bared in a deadly warning. The leader freezes, eyes wide with shock, but it's too late. Duke lunges, and the first man feels the force of the Rottweiler's strength as he's knocked backward, crashing into the pavement with a sickening thud. The gang members scramble, their bravado evaporating as they see the dog's sheer power. The moment of hesitation, that tiny crack in their confidence, is now wide open, and they realize, too late, that Eleanor Davis and her dog are not the easy targets they assumed. Duke stands over the man he's knocked down, a low, rumbling growl still escaping from his throat. The other gang members take a step back, their faces painted with fear and confusion. They never imagined this. They never imagined someone like Eleanor with her quiet strength would be their undoing. But now, the balance of power has shifted, and they are the ones who are no longer in control. The street is filled with a tense silence, the kind that follows a storm. Duke's growl fades, but his watchful eyes never leave the remaining men. Eleanor stands tall, her voice calm but firm as she addresses the gang members, her hand still firmly grasping Duke's leash. "I told you," she says quietly. "You picked the wrong woman to mess with." The sound of her voice, steady and unwavering, seals their fate. The gang's fear is palpable now, and Eleanor and Duke stand as a formidable force, their bond and loyalty to each other the only thing that matters in this moment. The air thickens with tension as Eleanor remains perfectly still, her eyes unwavering, fixed on the gang. Her mind works quickly, calculating her next move with the precision of someone who has faced far worse in her life. She doesn't need to panic. She doesn't need to act rashly. Her strength is in her control, in her ability to stay calm in the face of danger. And right now, every fiber of her being is focused on one thing: protecting herself and protecting Duke. As the men close in even further, they're more unpredictable now. Their mockery has stopped, replaced by a quiet, menacing energy that seems to pulse through the air, vibrating with the threat of violence. They're trying to gauge her, trying to figure out what she'll do next, but Eleanor doesn't give them the satisfaction of reading her. She's calm, collected, but beneath the surface, her muscles are taut, her every sense sharpened. She's prepared. The leader sneers, stepping forward again. But this time there's a hesitation, a pause. It's as though he's testing the air, seeing how far he can push before the moment shifts completely. Eleanor's stillness unsettles him, and the others follow his lead, inching closer but keeping a distance, uncertain now, no longer sure of what they've gotten themselves into. They can feel the change in the air, like a storm brewing just beyond the horizon. The tension is unbearable, hanging in the air like an electric charge. Then, without warning, one of the men, larger than the others, his face twisted with the kind of rage that only fear can fuel, lunges forward. His arm reaches for Eleanor's wrist, his fingers outstretched as he attempts to grab her jewelry, the locket that has become a symbol of everything they think they can steal from her. His eyes are wild, his body charging with the kind of aggression born from a desperate desire to assert control. But before he can even touch her, a flash of movement from the Duke is there in an instant, moving with a speed that seems impossible for a dog of his size. His growl cuts through the air like a battle cry, primal and fierce. He doesn't hesitate for even a moment. He's a force of nature, a protective guardian that has seen this moment coming long before any of these men even had a chance to act. His massive body springs forward, the power in his muscles on full display as he intercepts the man, blocking his path with a ferocity that takes the gang completely off guard. The man, so sure of himself just moments before, stumbles back, his eyes wide with panic as Duke's sharp bark fills the street. It's a sound so deafening, so full of warning, that it seems to echo through every corner of the neighborhood. And then, in a flash of motion, Duke snaps his teeth, inches away from the man's arm. The force of Duke's movement knocks the man back, sending him stumbling into his friends with an audible thud. He crashes to the ground, his hands raised in a futile attempt to ward off the dog's protective aggression. The other gang members freeze for a moment, their fear evident as Duke's growl reverberates in the air like a promise of what will happen next. The atmosphere is thick with dread. The quiet tension that had once defined the situation is now shattered, replaced by the raw energy of impending. And in that instant, Eleanor's trust in Duke becomes undeniable, almost sacred. She knows without a single doubt that Duke is her protector, her shield against the forces that threaten her peace. She doesn't flinch, doesn't move a muscle. Her focus never wavers from the gang, her eyes steady and calculating as she watches their every move. I told you. Eleanor's voice is calm, but laced with authority. Don't underestimate us. The words are simple, but they carry the weight of someone who has seen the worst and learned how to face it with unwavering resolve. Duke stands by her side, his eyes locked onto the gang members, his body ready to move again at a moment's notice. His loyalty is evident, not just in his physical actions, but in the way he stands by Eleanor's side without question. There is no fear in Duke. There is no doubt. He knows exactly what he is meant to do, and he will not allow anyone to harm his owner. The men, still recovering from the shock of Duke's sudden attack, glance nervously at each other. Their bravado is beginning to crack. Their confidence is slipping away, replaced by fear and uncertainty. They had thought Eleanor would be easy prey. They had thought that because she was alone, because she was a woman, and because of the color of her skin, they could push her around without consequence. But now they realize they have made a grave mistake. Duke stands in front of Eleanor, a fierce protector in every sense of the word. His body is poised, his eyes darting between the men, his muscles tense and ready for the next move. He doesn't need to bark again. His presence alone is enough to hold them at bay. They know now that they are not the ones in control. They are not the predators here. Duke is. Eleanor takes a slow, deliberate step forward, her gaze never leaving the gang members. She's not afraid, she's not even angry, she's just ready for whatever comes next. "You made a mistake," she says softly, her voice steady, "and now you'll have to live with it." The men shift uncomfortably, but none of them dares to move any closer. They know the balance is shifted. They know they are no longer the ones who hold power in this situation. When they hear a report from the campus, for the first time they are the ones who are vulnerable, the ones who are afraid, and it's a fear that grows with every passing second as they face down the quiet strength of a woman and her loyal dog. Duke's stance does not falter. His loyalty to Eleanor in this moment is absolute, and he remains a constant, unwavering force by her side. The gang's hesitation grows, the fear of what might happen next becoming more palpable. They know deep down that they've already crossed a line from which there's no return. The fear of Duke's loyalty is just the beginning of the terror they've unleashed. The tension in the air is so thick it feels as though the entire neighborhood is holding its breath, waiting for something to give. The gang, still reeling from the shock of Duke's attack, has regained some of their bravado. Their stares become harder, their steps more aggressive as they move in closer, trying to make sense of the situation and regain control over the moment they so foolishly believed they could dominate. One of the men, more desperate than the others, steps forward with a sudden, sharp movement. His eyes are fixed on Eleanor's locket, that cherished symbol of strength she's worn for years, a connection to the love and history she's built her life upon. With a low growl, he reaches for it, his fingers grasping greedily at the chain. But before he can even touch it, Duke is on him again, his growl escalating into a roar of fury. With lightning speed, Duke lunges forward, his body propelled by the sheer force of loyalty and protection. The man shrieks in surprise as Duke's massive jaws snap just inches away from his arm, the power of the dog's bite strong enough to knock him backward. The gang member stumbles, his body jerking as he scrambles away, panic flashing across his face. The others watch in disbelief, fear starting to take hold of them. Duke stands firm, every muscle rippling with the promise of more violence should they press their luck further. His growl continues, a constant reminder of the danger they are facing. He's not just a dog, he's a weapon, and he is unwavering in his protection of Eleanor. Eleanor, for her part, remains unshaken. She's not even flinching. Her eyes never leave the gang, her voice calm but filled with authority. "You've picked the wrong woman," she says again, her tone carrying the weight of someone who has faced down much worse than this. There is no fear in her voice, no sign of weakness. She's a force of nature, standing her ground as the gang's threats and aggression escalate around her. The men, realizing they are losing control of the situation, grow more desperate. One of them, the biggest of the group, steps forward, his fists clenched, his face twisted with anger. He reaches for Eleanor, trying to grab her by the arm, his grip tight and relentless. He pulls her toward him with brute strength, as if thinking that overpowering her will shift the balance of power back in his favor. But he doesn't get far, not even a step. Duke is there, faster than any of them can react. With a ferocious growl, he lunges at the man's outstretched arm, sinking his teeth into the side of his leg. The man's cry of pain echoes through the street as he falls to the ground, his entire body shaking in terror. Duke's grip is unyielding, his bite is strong and true as Eleanor's faith in him. The man's leg is pinned by Duke's powerful jaws, and he cannot escape. The gang members freeze, stunned by the brutality of Duke's response. They had underestimated him, thought he was just a dog, nothing more than an obstacle. But now they see the truth. Duke is no ordinary dog. He is a force of nature, and he will not let them harm Eleanor. The man writhes in pain, his hands grabbing desperately at Duke's jaws, trying in vain to pry them open. But Duke doesn't let go. His eyes, dark and focused, lock onto the man's, a warning clear in his gaze. The message is simple: hurt her, and you will pay. Eleanor stands just a few feet away, calm as ever, her gaze unwavering. She's not afraid of the men, and she's certainly not afraid of their violence. She knows Duke will protect her, and that knowledge fills her with an inner strength that the gang can't even begin to comprehend. One of the other men, the leader of the group, steps back. His eyes dart between Duke and Eleanor, his expression full of fear and disbelief. He had thought this would be an easy score, a quick robbery that no one would care about. But now the tables have turned. He can see the power in Eleanor, the strength in her resolve, and he knows they are on the edge of something far worse than they ever imagined. "This isn't how this was supposed to go," the leader mutters, his voice shaky. But Eleanor's eyes are cold, calculating. She doesn't answer him. "There's no need. The situation speaks for itself." Duke's grip doesn't loosen as the man struggles beneath him. He doesn't need to bark again. The message is clear. You touch her, you deal with me. One of the other gang members, desperate and fearful, takes a few steps back. "We should get out of here. Now!" he says, his voice quivering. His eyes are wide with terror as he watches Duke's unwavering stance, still holding on to the man's leg with an iron grip. The air is thick with fear, and they can all feel it now, the weight of their mistake. Eleanor doesn't move. She doesn't need to. She simply watches as the gang's fear grows, as the violence begins to ebb out of them, replaced by uncertainty and dread. She stands tall, proud, and resolute, her hand resting gently on Duke's back, a silent signal that he should stand down. Duke, ever loyal, releases his hold on the man's leg, though he keeps a watchful eye on the gang. The moment is tense, as if the world is holding its breath, waiting for what will happen next. "You were warned," Eleanor says, her voice still calm, still strong. "Leave now, before I decide to make things even worse for you." The gang, now fully aware of the error they've made, hesitates for a moment longer, their eyes flicking nervously between Eleanor and Duke. But the fear is overwhelming. They know they've pushed too far. They've crossed a line they can't come back from. With one final fearful glance at Eleanor, they turn and flee, scrambling into their truck like rats fleeing a sinking ship. Duke watches them go, his muscles still tensed, his eyes locked onto their retreating forms. The sound of the truck's engine revs in the distance. But Duke doesn't relax until the vehicle has completely vanished from sight. Only then does he turn back to Eleanor, his posture relaxing, his tail giving a slow, satisfied wag. Eleanor smiles, bending down to gently pat his head, her fingers running through. "Good boy," she whispers, her voice full of pride and gratitude. But in her heart, she knows that what happened today wasn't just about Duke protecting her. It was about them, about her strength, her resilience, and the bond they share, the bond that no one, no matter how big or tough, could ever break. And as the sun begins to set behind them, casting long shadows over the quiet street, Eleanor knows that she has faced the darkness and come out victorious thanks to the loyalty of her dog, Duke. She stands there, a woman who has fought back against the odds and won, her spirit unbroken, her power undeniable. The atmosphere is charged with palpable fear, the air thick with desperation. The gang, who moments ago had been so certain of their dominance, now find themselves faltering, their bravado cracking under the weight of the situation. Their initial aggression has waned, replaced with a creeping unease as they begin to recognize the true depth of the danger they're in. They had come here expecting an easy target, someone they could push around, rob, and leave behind without a second thought. But Eleanor, standing tall and unshaken, and Duke, her loyal Rottweiler, have turned the tables. The men exchange nervous glances, their earlier arrogance replaced by doubt. They thought they could overpower a single woman and her dog, but Eleanor's calm defiance, coupled with Duke's ferocious protection, has shattered their illusion of control. The ground beneath their feet feels less solid now, and the shadows of doubt begin to cloud their mind. One of the men, a young man with a scar running down his cheek, steps forward, his eyes darting nervously between Duke and Eleanor. He reaches for the knife tucked into his jacket, a desperate move that only serves to show how much he's starting to panic. He had come here for an easy robbery, not a bloody fight, but now, faced with the reality of the situation, he's second-guessing his every move. "We don't have to do this," he mutters, his voice shaky. His fingers tremble as he grips the knife, but his body language betrays his fear. He's not sure what he's doing anymore, caught between the fight he started and the terror rising in his gut. Eleanor watches him carefully, her eyes never leaving him. There's no fear in her gaze, only the steady confidence of someone who has faced worse and walked away stronger. "Just look at Bob," Eleanor whispers. The scratches have suddenly become pleasant. She doesn't respond to him directly, but her posture speaks volumes. She stands tall, unflinching, showing them that no amount of intimidation will shake her. She's seen men like them before, cowards who would fold when faced with true resistance. Duke, meanwhile, is no longer merely a bystander. His eyes are locked on to the group, his body rigid with purpose. His protective instincts are on high alert. As the scar-faced man takes a hesitant step closer, Duke snarls loudly, the deep rumble coming from his chest like thunder. His hackles stand at attention, and his muscles coil with the promise of violence. "Get back," the man stammers, his voice a sharp contrast to the bravado he'd once had, but the warning is too late. In an instant, Duke leaps forward, his powerful body moving with the speed and precision of a trained fighter. The man's eyes widen in terror as Duke's jaws snap just inches from his hand. The force of the dog's bite so strong that the man stumbles backward in sheer shock. Duke's growl vibrates the air, a sound so menacing that the others around him falter. The gang member scrambles to avoid the dog, his knife dropping from his hand as he raises his arms in a futile attempt to shield himself. Duke doesn't relent. He's a force of nature now, no longer just a pet but a fierce guardian. His teeth gleam in the fading light, and his growl intensifies as he chases the man backward. The scar-faced man trips over his own feet, landing hard on the ground, and the others freeze in place, the reality of the situation sinking in. They've misjudged everything. The gang, once full of bravado, now stands frozen, terror flooding their senses. They can't move without facing Duke's unrelenting wrath. Every time one of them tries to inch closer, Duke responds, another vicious growl, another snap of his powerful jaws. The message is clear. Make one wrong move and you'll regret it. Eleanor, standing tall with her arms crossed, is the picture of calm in the midst of the storm. She doesn't flinch as the men scramble, and her voice remains steady, almost interested in the chaos unfolding before her. "You've got nothing," she says, her words cold and calculated. "Not my jewelry, not my dignity, and certainly not my fear. You're wasting your time." Her words, simple as they are, carry the weight of someone who has seen too much to be intimidated by the likes of them. Her confidence is as solid as the ground beneath her feet, and it unsettles the men in ways they can't understand. They came here expecting an easy target, but instead they found themselves up against something far worse than they ever imagined. Eleanor isn't just fighting back. She's dismantling their perception of power, and Duke, standing firm beside her, is the living embodiment of that power. As Duke paces in front of Eleanor, watching each of the gang members carefully, his every movement is filled with purpose. He's not just a dog. He's her protector, her shield, her unwavering ally in the face of danger. And the men are beginning to see that they're up against more than just a woman. They're up against an unbreakable bond, one that goes deeper than blood. The gang starts to realize they've bitten off more than they can chew. They thought they were going to rob a helpless woman, but instead they're staring down the barrel of their own fear. They've pushed too far. They've underestimated Duke, and in doing so, they've made their own nightmare come to life. One of the men, the leader of the group, tries to regain some control. His voice cracks as he calls out to the others, but his words lack the conviction they had earlier. "Come on, let's just go," he urges, his eyes shifting nervously from Duke to the others, his posture betraying his own fear. But it's too late. The fear has taken root. The gang members glance at each other, uncertain, second-guessing their every move. They came here to take something, but what they've left with is a sense of dread and the knowledge that they're dealing with forces far beyond their comprehension. Duke growls again, this time low and menacing. His body tenses, ready to spring at the next threat. The message is clear. If they don't leave now, they will not walk away unscathed. The gang members take a collective step back, their earlier bravado completely dissolved in the face of Duke's power and Eleanor's unflinching resolve. With fear evident in every movement, the gang slowly begins to retreat. They have no choice. The threat of Duke's bite, combined with Eleanor's defiant strength, has broken their will to fight. Slowly they turn and flee, scrambling back to their truck, their steps hurried and uncertain. The sound of their truck's engine starting up is a small victory for Eleanor, a moment of triumph that rings out in the quiet neighborhood. Duke watches them go, his eyes narrowing with one final warning. As the truck speeds away, he lets out one final triumphant bark. The message is clear. They are no longer a threat. And Eleanor, standing tall with the strength of her dog beside her, knows that they will never underestimate her or her dog again. The street falls silent once more, the danger having passed. But the memory of what just transpired will linger long after the sun sets. In this quiet suburban neighborhood, Eleanor and Duke have proven that no one can intimidate them, not even the worst of threats. The gang has been outmatched, outwitted, outmaneuvered, and overpowered. Their bravado has turned into fear, their sense of entitlement now replaced by a rising tide of panic. They stand at the edge, uncertain, questioning their own survival. The moment they underestimated Eleanor and Duke, they sealed their fate. But still, there's one last desperate move left in them. One last attempt to claim something, anything, before they're forced to flee. The street holds its breath. A stillness settles over the confrontation, as though even the world itself is waiting for the final act to unfold. Eleanor stands her ground, unwavering. She knows this is the moment, the tipping point where everything could either end or spiral further out of control. But she is not afraid. Not now, not ever. Not with Duke by her side. The sun is dipping lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the street, but Eleanor's presence seems to fill the air with an aura of invincibility. She faces the gang with a defiance that refuses to bend, her stance a testament to everything she has fought for. She dares them to make their move, daring them to prove that they are as brave as they thought they were. There's no fear in her eyes, only a resolve forged from years of facing adversity. "You've had your chance," Eleanor says, her voice steady but full of quiet power. "Now leave before you regret it." Her words hang in the air, pregnant with meaning, each syllable a marker of her strength and authority. She's not just defending herself now, she's defending her dignity, her home, and the bond she shares with her dog. The gang's eyes flicker from one another to Duke, who stands beside Eleanor, alert and fierce, his eyes never leaving them. He's the embodiment of Eleanor's resolve. And now the gang knows they're not facing a helpless woman and her dog. They're facing an insurmountable force. But one of the men, desperate and with nothing left to lose, steps forward. His movements are erratic now, more frantic than anything else. His hand darts out toward Eleanor's neck, reaching for her prized necklace, a symbol of her late husband's love. The other seems to see and pull her arm, bouncing off the desk. He believes it's the one thing she can't afford to lose, the one thing she'll fight for above all else. Eleanor sees it in his eyes, the desperation, the recklessness. She doesn't flinch, doesn't move. She knows what he's about to do, and she's ready for it. As his hand closes around the necklace, time seems to slow down. It's the final move, the moment of truth, and Eleanor's trust in Duke has never been clearer than in this single heartbeat of time. In an instant, Duke springs into action, moving with a ferocity that only a protector can summon. His muscles coil and then release, his body launching forward with the force of a battering ram. He's not just defending Eleanor now, he's delivering justice. With a powerful leap, Duke slams into the man's side, knocking him off balance and sending him crashing to the ground with a bone-jarring thud. The thug's grip on Eleanor's necklace falters, and in a split second the precious chain is free, dangling safely from her neck once more. Duke, his teeth bared in a snarl, stands over the man, his growl deep and terrifying. The gang member struggles to regain his footing, but Duke's body language speaks volumes. He's not going anywhere, not unless he wants to face the full wrath of this loyal protector. The street is filled with chaos. The man who tried to grab the necklace is now on his back, scrambling to get up, but clearly dazed and overwhelmed by Duke's unrelenting force. The other gang members hesitate, their faces a mixture of fear and disbelief. They were supposed to be in control, but now the tables have turned. Now they are the ones on the defensive, and Duke is the one who holds the power. Eleanor, still standing tall and unfazed, takes a slow, measured step forward. Her eyes lock onto the gang member, still struggling beneath Duke's watchful gaze. She feels a surge of pride, not just for herself, but for Duke, for the way he stood beside her and protected her with everything he has. He's more than just a dog. He's her hero. "I warned you," Eleanor says, her voice steady and unyielding. "You didn't listen, and now you're going to pay the price." Her words strike like a hammer, echoing in the silent space between the gang members. The leader of the group, the man who had been so confident moments before, now looks like a cornered animal. His bravado is gone. All that's left is the raw fear that spreads across his face as he watches Duke move like a predator, his every step deliberate, his every motion calculated. It's clear now that there's no way out for them. They're trapped, caught in their own greed, their own hatred, and their own mistakes. Duke's presence is overwhelming. His protective instincts, honed over years of loyalty to Eleanor, are in full force. His growl reverberates in the air, and the remaining gang members take a collective step back. They've seen the way he took down their comrade, and they know that they don't stand a chance against him. Joyfully they help one to the other, stand under an aisle. Eleanor watches them, calm and composed. There's no anger in her heart, only a deep sense of satisfaction that justice has been served, satisfaction that her trust in Duke has never wavered. She knows that this moment will forever be a reminder of the strength that lies in loyalty, in courage, and in standing firm when the world tries to tear you down. The gang hesitates, and then, in a final act of defeat, they turn and flee, abandoning their plans and their weapons in a mad scramble to escape. They know they can't win this fight. They know they've lost. Eleanor doesn't move. She simply watches them go, her shoulders straight, her heart steady. Duke, ever watchful, follows their movements until they vanish from sight. Only then does he relax, his body language shifting from alert to satisfied. He's done his job, and Eleanor has done hers. The street is quiet once again, the tension lifting from the air like fog. but the echo of what just transpired will remain long after the night falls. Eleanor and Duke have stood their ground, and in doing so they've proven something far more powerful than any threat the gang could have ever posed. In that moment, Eleanor knows that there's no challenge she can't face, no enemy she can't defeat, because with Duke by her side, there's nothing she can't overcome. The air is thick with tension, the echoes of their confrontation hanging heavy over the quiet suburban street. The gang stands at a crossroads, their previous arrogance now shattered. Their bravado, once so brash and sure, evaporates like morning mist in the face of Duke's unwavering protection and Eleanor's unshakable confidence. For the first time in a long while, they begin to question their own choices, their own strength. Fear creeps into their minds, replacing the smug entitlement that once fueled their actions. Eleanor doesn't flinch. She doesn't move a muscle. She's the picture of calm in the face of chaos, standing as a pillar of strength amidst the crumbling facade of the gang's bravado. Duke, ever watchful, growls low in his throat, a constant reminder of the fierce protector at her side. The message is clear. No one gets to harm her, not while Duke is here. The leader of the gang, the one who thought he had control, now stands frozen. His hands are clenched into fists, but they shake, betraying his internal panic. He's faced violence before, perhaps even perpetrated it, but never like this. He's used to threatening the helpless, never anticipating that his victim would have the strength, the resolve, and the loyalty of a force like Duke. The other members of the gang look to each other, eyes darting nervously from Duke to Eleanor. They'd come with their own sense of invincibility, driven by the illusion of power and entitlement, but now faced with a woman who refuses to back down and a dog who is more beast than pet, that illusion cracks. It's replaced by a palpable fear that makes their limbs stiffen, makes their hearts pound with dread. The leader hesitates, his eyes flicking toward the others. The gang is no longer a cohesive unit, but a group of individuals, each of them questioning whether it's worth it to continue this fight. The gleam of greed in their eyes has dulled, replaced by the cold realization that they've pushed their luck too far. Eleanor's gaze never wavers. She watches them closely, her stance still defiant, her heart beats steady, her mind clear. She doesn't need to speak again. The message has been made loud and clear. There is no room for compromise. She has faced worse than this and stood tall. And with Duke by her side, she knows she will never let anyone take what's hers, not without a fight. Duke remains at her side, his eyes locked on the gang, a silent sentinel. His posture is a warning, every muscle taut, every sinew ready to spring into action if they make one wrong move. He's the embodiment of Eleanor's strength, a force of nature in his own right, and as long as Duke is there, no one will threaten Eleanor again. The leader of the gang takes a tentative step back. Then another. The others follow suit, exchanging nervous glances, shifting uneasily on their feet. The bravado they once wore like a shield is now an uncomfortable weight, one they can no longer carry. It's clear to them this is not a battle they can win. Not with their words, not with their fists, not with their threats. They've been bested by something far stronger than physical force, by Eleanor's resilience and Duke's unwavering loyalty. The tension in the air builds for a moment longer, each second stretching out like a coiled spring ready to snap. But as the gang members hesitate, they feel the weight of their own fear pressing down on them. They see the resolve in Eleanor's eyes, the unyielding certainty that no matter what they do, they will not break her. The street is silent except for Duke's low growl, a constant reminder of the danger that lies in crossing them. In a final act of defeat, the gang starts to retreat. The leader of the group stumbles back, his hands raised slightly as if to ward off any further aggression. He doesn't look at Eleanor, he doesn't look at Duke. He keeps his eyes trained on the ground, his shoulders hunched in shame. One by one, the others follow, each of them realizing that there's no prize to be won here, no spoils to be taken. They were outmatched from the start, and they know it now. Eleanor doesn't move as they begin to back away. Her stance doesn't change. She remains firmly planted, her chest high, her head held high. She's seen this before. the way aggressors retreat when faced with something they cannot defeat. She's lived through the ugliness of hatred and fear, and she knows that the real victory isn't in the confrontation. It's in the unwavering refusal to bend, no matter how harsh the world may be. The last of the gang members turns and starts to jog toward the truck, glancing back over his shoulder as if he might still have a chance to salvage something from the mess they've made. But Duke's growl silences him before he can even reach the vehicle. It's a growl that says it all. You're not welcome here. Leave, and never come back. With one final look, the gang disappears into the distance, their footsteps fading into nothing. The street returns to its eerie calm, but the tension lingers in the air like smoke after a fire. Eleanor stands still for a moment, her gaze never leaving the space where the gang once stood. Then, slowly, she exhales, releasing the breath she didn't realize she'd been holding. Duke, ever watchful, sidles up to her, his body relaxed now that the danger is past. Eleanor reaches down to pet him, a silent gesture of gratitude, of love, of the bond they share. He looks up at her with eyes full of loyalty, eyes that have seen more than most can imagine and still choose to stand by her side. "Good boy," Eleanor whispers, her voice soft but full of pride, and Duke responds with a low, contented growl, his tail swishing gently behind him. For a moment they stand there together, the only sound the fading hum of the truck engine as it disappears down the street. The quiet settles in, but Eleanor knows the peace she feels now is not the end of her story. It's just another chapter in a life that has been defined by resilience, strength, and the unbreakable bond between a woman and her dog. And though the gang may have retreated, Eleanor knows one thing for certain: she will never back down, not as long as she has Duke by her side. The street is quiet now, the only sound the soft rustling of leaves in the late afternoon breeze. But for Eleanor, the world feels different. The confrontation is over, the danger has passed, but the weight of the encounter lingers in the air, a constant reminder of the choice she made, to stand firm, to not be moved, to refuse to let fear dictate her actions. After the gang has retreated, Eleanor pulls out her phone, her hand steady as she dials the police. She takes a deep breath, recounting the details of the confrontation with precision, her voice unwavering as she describes the men, their truck, the threats they made, and how her dog Duke intervened. There's no hesitation in her words. The woman who stood her ground in the face of violence is the same woman who now calls for justice, because she knows that what happened today is more than just a personal victory. It's a message to the world that no one has the right to threaten her, and that actions will have consequences. Eleanor hangs up the phone and stands for a moment, eyes scanning the street around her. The quiet suburban neighborhood, which had once felt so serene, now seems different. The houses, the people within them, the once judging stares, all of it has shifted. Perhaps it's just her perception, but she feels as though the world is watching her now, seeing her for what she truly is, a woman of strength, resilience, and unyielding courage. The whispers that once followed her, the quiet murmurs of disapproval, now feel distant. Today, Eleanor Davis had reclaimed her power. Duke, always by her side, nudges her hand, his presence a calming force. He's not just a dog. He's her protector, her constant companion, the one who stood by her when the world seemed set against her. She kneels down, her fingers brushing the top of his head, and she whispers softly, "You did good, Duke. We did good." Eleanor's reflection is interrupted by the arrival of the police, who arrive in a flurry of activity. They take her statement, ask for any evidence she might have, and assure her that they'll take care of everything. It's clear that they're taking this seriously. No longer are her concerns dismissed or ignored. The world is waking up to the truth of what happened. They're not only dealing with an assault on a woman, but an assault on her dignity, her autonomy, and her right to walk the streets of her own neighborhood without fear. The next few weeks are a whirlwind. Eleanor spends her days going about her life, quiet, steady, resolute. But the ripples of what happened continue to affect the world around her. News outlets pick up the story, spreading the word of the woman who stood firm against a gang of racially motivated criminals who refused to back down in the face of violence. Eleanor's image, not as a victim, but as a hero, begins to take shape in the public eye. But the most significant impact is felt in the courtroom. The trial, though brief, is a moment of reckoning for the gang members. The evidence is clear, and their actions are undeniable. The gang, once so arrogant in their belief that they could intimidate and destroy, now find themselves at the mercy of the law. The courtroom, cold and sterile, contrasts sharply with the heat of the confrontation in the street, but in that space, justice begins to take root. Eleanor watches from the back of the courtroom, her eyes steady as she observes the gang members, now shackled, facing the consequences of their actions. The leader, the one who had dared to approach her with the most bravado, sits slumped in his chair, no longer sure of himself. He's a far cry from the man who had believed he could take whatever he wanted, regardless of the cost. And the others? They look smaller now, their earlier confidence stripped away by the weight of their choices. The judge's gavel slams down, sentencing the men to time behind bars. It's not a victory of vengeance, but a victory of justice. Eleanor doesn't smile. She doesn't need to. The satisfaction comes not in seeing them punished, but in knowing that they will never have the chance to harm her or anyone else again. As the trial ends, Eleanor steps out of the courtroom, Duke by her side. The sun is setting, casting long shadows on the pavement. But she's not afraid. She never was. What she's learned from the experience is that courage isn't something you find in the face of easy victories. It's something you create when the world tests you, when the darkness threatens to swallow you whole. And in that moment, Eleanor Davis knew. She wasn't just surviving, she was thriving. The neighborhood, too, has begun to change. The whispers of judgment, the silent prejudice that had once followed her, are beginning to fade. Eleanor, her head held high, walks through the streets, no longer burdened by the weight of suspicion or doubt. People stop and take notice, not just of her, but of Duke, the loyal dog who had saved her life. They see the bond between them, the unspoken understanding that runs deeper than words. The world is beginning to see her for who she truly is, not just a black woman walking her dog, but a force to be reckoned with. As Eleanor reaches her home, she looks down at Duke. He's tired but content, his protective instinct fulfilled. She reaches down to pet him, a quiet moment of gratitude shared between them. The world may have tried to break her, but it had failed, and she knew, as long as she had Duke by her side, she would always rise again. "We made it," Eleanor murmurs, her voice full of quiet pride, and Duke responds with a soft growl, as if to say, "Of course we did." In the end, it wasn't the gang that won. It wasn't fear. It was courage, strength, and the unbreakable bond between a woman and her dog. A bond that nothing, no hate, no violence, no fear, could ever destroy. The sun sinks lower on the horizon, casting its golden rays across the quiet neighborhood. The trees that once whispered with judgment now seem to stand a little taller, their branches reaching toward the sky as if offering their quiet respect. Eleanor Davis walks down the street, her step steady, her head held high. Beside her, Duke trots along, his powerful frame moving with ease, the quiet guardian he's always been. Together they are a force, unseen yet undeniable. As they walk, Eleanor's thoughts drift back to the moment when everything changed, to the men who thought they could break her, to the fear that threatened to overwhelm her. But in that moment she had refused to be a victim. She had chosen courage, and she had chosen to stand firm. And now, looking around at the familiar street she's always walked, Eleanor realizes just how much strength she's always had. Deep inside her, she's faced a world that wasn't always kind, but she's always had the will to push back, to live on her terms, to never allow herself to be defined by the prejudice of others. It wasn't just about fighting back physically. It wasn't just about Duke's protection or the victory in the courtroom. It was about her own power, her ability to stand in the face of hate and refuse to be moved. The strength she had fought so hard to maintain, the resilience that had shaped her throughout her life, had been tested, but it had not been broken. Today, Eleanor Davis had learned that courage doesn't always look like loud defiance. Sometimes it's quiet, steady, and unwavering. It's the ability to keep walking even when the world tries to make you stand still. Duke, as always, is by her side, his loyal presence a reminder of the bond they share. The world sees him as just a dog, but Eleanor knows better. Duke isn't just her companion, he's her protector, her ally, her guardian. And together they make an unbreakable team. Where Eleanor has her strength, Duke has his loyalty, and it is that unwavering loyalty that has carried them both through the darkest of moments. Eleanor glances down at Duke, who looks up at her with a knowing gaze. They exchange a quiet moment of understanding. She smiles softly, reaching down to pat his head, her heart swelling with gratitude. She knows that their bond is something few people will ever truly understand, but it doesn't matter. They've been through too much together, and their connection is as strong as ever. No matter what comes their way, they will always stand side by side. As they continue their walk through the neighborhood, Eleanor's confidence grows with each step. She doesn't notice the eyes that follow her or the whispers that might linger in the air. All that matters is that she's walking with her head high, a quiet force of strength. The neighborhood, once filled with silent judgment, now seems to have shifted. The people who once looked at her with suspicion now seem to see her for what she truly is, a woman who will not be intimidated, a woman whose spirit cannot be broken. She reaches the end of the street, the sun now fully set, and for a brief moment Eleanor pauses, looking back over her shoulder. Her gaze lingers on the houses, the streetlights flickering on, casting their warm glow on the pavement. Everything feels different now. It's as though the world has shifted in subtle ways. Perhaps it's her, perhaps it's the change in others, but something has changed. And Eleanor knows that change starts with people like her who are willing to stand tall, to stand firm, no matter what. Eleanor's journey is one of resilience, but it's also one of reflection. What if you had been in her shoes? Would you have stood your ground? Would you have been able to summon the